Hello, Neha. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. So glad to have you on. And today, before the conversation, I was talking with Désirée, which is the other 50% of the podcast that people don't see so often, that we finally have a girl again. So I'm so happy because I want to have more people from different countries and also like girls, boys, and any other gender that is out there. But it's very hard to find. So welcome to the podcast, and you can introduce yourself a little bit who you are and what you do.
Thank you. My name is Neha Sadruddin. I'm a senior BIM specialist at Bjarke Ingels group here in New York. So I'm one of three on the BIM team here. And yeah, excited to be here.
So you're our third big star on the podcast. The first, I mean, Oliver counts like kind of New York and London both because we've had him
Right,
twice and he was in New York, and then we
right.
had one from Copenhagen. But that doesn't mean you're gonna say the same things because you're a different person with a different background, with different story. And I think it's very interesting when we had the chance to talk a little bit with each other about your background. So I mean, I know a little bit, but I don't know everything. So this is the time that I'm gonna discover too, together with everyone else, better in detail. So the first question I ask everybody, because I'm just very curious, and this is for me, it's important to know: what was the reason for which you wanted to become a professional architect, and you wanted to work in the field of design, more or less, because architect is design.
Yeah. Um, well, there isn't really a short answer to that because I remember I was in like ninth grade, and we have to kind of sort of that. I think that's when you have to choose sort of subjects for your GCSE. So I studied the British sort of curriculum, um, and I was that's when you sort of decide, okay, this is the sort of path you want to take, and I said that I think that I never really thought about architecture before then. Um, and So I was just kind of, think like brainstorming almost like what kind of career paths are out there and what can I do? And I suddenly thought of architecture. And I remember telling my dad, um, and he's a surgeon, so he has like no sort of connection professionally to the field. But he was like, "Oh, I wanted to do architecture," and I was deciding, and so I think maybe that was, somewhere like, in like somewhere like embedded in like my upbringing or something where he, had this interest and like I sort of picked up on it. So that's when I sort of decided, and there's no architects in my family, or weren't um, any in at the time. Now I have a cousin who's also studying architecture. So I have one other one family member who does the same thing I do. But it was so I think there was also that sort of thing where I was like, I want to do something that nobody else has done in my family, and so I just picked it, and I didn't really. I mean, I knew I liked math and I liked physics, but later on I realized that that's not really a requirement. Despite unlike the what everyone says, and I but I didn't know how to draw, and I didn't I kind of sucked at art at the time. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna have to really work hard on this, and I'm gonna have to take up art, and I'm gonna have to learn how to draw. So that's how it all began. But later I realized that, I think I sort of get it, the interest I get from my parents, because anytime we would travel, I think my dad would always talk about, like, we would always walk everywhere, and he loves traveling to Europe, and so we would always go to, anywhere we would go, he would just be talking about, oh, look at this facade and look at this architecture and look at, the details. So I think so, there was some sort of interest kind of, developing like, without me sort of knowing really, or like, um, yeah, sort of this like a subconsciously like, um, uh, growing inside. But yeah, so, and then, yeah, I think I started also comparing like my house to like my friends' houses, and like how the spaces are different and how much light I get versus how much sort of, you know, like they have in their house and how it's set up. And I remember like I come from Pakistan, so it's very, very hot in like at least the south. So I grew up in Karachi, and I remember my dad would be very against turning on the AC, because obviously like the bills would kind of, shoot up. So he would really kind of, encourage like natural ventilation, like, oh, we have so much good ventilation, so he would constantly, and I hated it at the time, but I kind of understand now. I'm kind of dealing with the same sort of, like, New York summers are kind of brutal. So I try to save on energy. And then I think my mom is very detail oriented. And even though she also didn't study anything design related, she loves to cook, and like when she cooks, she wants to present it, you know, very like she's a perfectionist when it comes to presentation. So I think I kind of got that sort of perfectionist attitude from her. So I think it's all from the parents, but not sort of actively, I don't know,
So it's
instilled in
not
me.
like that somebody in your
Yeah,
family
really.
was in that business. It's just that
Yeah, no, no, I had
somehow you got
no
interested into
idea.
it. And
I had, yeah, I almost knew nobody.
and you mentioned you're from Pakistan, which is also was super interesting to me because I gotta be honest, never in my life I thought I'm gonna have the I don't know relation or conversation long form with someone from Pakistan. But there are just so many countries out there, and when I meet people from these
Right.
different countries, it's so nice to me to discover how cultures are different, but in the same time, we as human beings are very, very similar. And I was curious, what was your education? Did you study in Pakistan? Also, you mentioned you was born. You were born. I mean, you mentioned to me privately you were born in England, and then you studied according to the English system somehow. So, where
Right.
was your education? And another thing that is always interesting to me is like, as you said before, there are certain preconception when you do architecture, and this preconception are kind of crashed when you start actually studying architecture. So this is for me curious, how was that, like where did you study, and how was expectations versus reality?
Yeah. So yeah, I was born in the UK. So my parents sort of lived there for about a decade. But they're both originally from Pakistan, and so when I was five, we all moved. Um, they moved back, and I moved for the first time to Pakistan. And so most of my schooling, from elementary or primary, um, to high school was in Karachi. And but I did go to I went to a convent school, and then I went to an English school. So it was always the curriculum was always in English, and we sort of, I think around sixth grade, I think my parents decided that they wanted me to study like the GCSE sort of curriculum. Um, so that I wrote, like, English is technically my first language, even though it's not my mother tongue. Um, but your second question about the expectations versus reality, I think it was not. I didn't think it was going to be that um, sort of time intensive, or like. um, I don't know. It's like architecture school is very difficult. I don't. I remember being very, very miserable my first year at Pratt when I first came to New York for undergrad, and but I think it's a rigorous process. So it did take a lot of time to kind of get used to, you know, um, sort of uh, always doing studies and always kind of trying to experiment with new materials or new forms. And I think what I expected it to be was more, um, I don't know, maybe like that I would be first introduced to a site, and um, it would be more about like more sort of the knowing about more theoretical, I think. So like the environmental aspect of it, or like learning about like sort of like site and programming or something like that. But my first year was very, very abstract. So we were learning about like we had like our first studio. My first studio class was about like joinery, and like I had to make these like wooden models and like sort of come up with all these different, you know, study these different types of joints and like make up a very like random abstract sort of model that had nothing to do with like a real building. But obviously later on, then it like kind of we started to study light, like how light plays in that model, and like how it um, or how like very, very abstract sort of ideas. And now I feel like it was a good start because it lets you, kind of really open your mind and think a little bit more broadly. So I think that was probably the objective of the class, which at the time I was like, why am I doing this? And this is more like, this is I'm literally just learning how to cut wood and putting things together, and I don't understand it. And but I think I had a pretty good project by the end of it. So um, I was pretty proud, and I was like, okay, this. I think if I can do it, I can. If I can do the first semester, I think I can finish the entire 5 years. So yeah. What was
Um,
your sort of school like?
oh
Your
yeah. Well, for me,
undergrad?
wasn't that much of a surprise because I had a friend, like my mom had a colleague, and her son is he actually was on the podcast. I'm not gonna say who that is, but he was on the podcast, and he's like 4 or 5 years older than me, and I learned from him what it's like to study architecture in Bulgaria, and I was in Italy, and I was studying at the High School of Arts, and this high school in Italy is like 5 years, and after the second year in that high school, we could pick in which direction we wanna go, more like I don't know, painting or more sculptural, or there was this interior design and architecture which I choose, and there we had teachers which were architects, and they explained to us how it is more or less. So for me, it wasn't that much of a surprise when I started.
So you were prepared.
Yeah, I was very prepared for like stuff which were regarding drawing, and for example, we knew already a little bit of Rhino and AutoCAD at school. I mean,
Oh wow.
yes, so we were a very, very good level regarding that, but I wasn't so prepared for mathematics. We have some mathematics in Rome about construction, statics, and stuff like that, and there it was really, really hard. So I needed to like just pass the exam. That was my goal. That nothing more than that. And for me was like I saw how the teachers during the first 2 semesters, the first year, they were very, very rough on everybody on purpose. I know, I knew it was on purpose, and because I mean I came from a school where I knew how to draw, and they would still like mark in red some stuff and tell me this is shit and stuff and be very rude to me. And I thought, okay, like I hope it's not like 5 years like this, but I think they just want to push to see who's gonna drop it. And
Yeah,
this
I
is
think that's a
why I
similar approach.
yeah, and I noticed that this approach is a little bit everywhere. And then I said, okay, no, I'm not gonna. And I pushed through, and I was very successful my first year of university. Because successful in Italy means you pass all your exams. You don't have to do the like I don't know. In Italy, the system works that you have like each semester you have classes, and then you can book online when you want to pass a certain exam. And if you don't pass one exam, you can do it next semester again. So it's not like um, you fail. There are available dates, and you just have to book when you want to do an exam. You don't do it together with all your classmates. And I was, for me, success was that I passed all the exams in the dedicated in the dedicated
Yeah,
semester for them, and that was success for me. So yeah, and then the second year was like, okay, hi, do you want to have coffee? The teacher would meet me and say like, do you want to have coffee together? I was like, yeah, I knew
yeah,
you doing that, so it was better, and it was better, and
yeah.
then moved to Germany, and then started working. So yeah, but yeah, it was as you said, like I hated it on a certain level because a lot of my friends were studying something else, like I don't know, economics and stuff like that, and they would be with books or engineering, so they would be with books and some calculations and stuff. And I would be constantly with this like drawings and pencils, and my hands would be like full of colors, and they would make fun of me
Yeah,
like, "What are you doing? Like, what are you style? You're coloring some stuff." Ha ha ha. And they didn't know the concept of all nighters and the concept of, and I told them it's not like reading a book. It's not like you read the formula, you learn how you apply it, they give you a problem, and you use. It's more complicated than that. It's like an open-end question. So
right,
that
right.
that
Yeah,
was that was my
there's no
person.
right answer.
No, and then you can constantly change stuff until the last moment. And I think sometimes the teachers do it on purpose, just so they want you to get real life experience. Because I had a private conversation with one of my
Right.
teachers, and he told me, "Oh, if you think this is stressful, wait to start working." And I was like, "Well, okay." That was more like a shock to me than the rest. But yeah,
So
but
your the practice of architecture, like after you graduated, was more difficult than your school?
no, that's what he said. But
Oh,
I
that's
don't
what he
know.
said.
Maybe if you have your own practice, um, it is harder. I don't know. But I
Maybe, yeah.
mean, no matter how hard it gets, when you work, at least you're paid for it. So you're like, okay,
That's true.
I'm fine.
There's an
Like
incentive there.
it sucks, but at the end of the month, there is a salary in your account, and you're fine. And in school, you have to do it just with the hope for the future. This is
That
my
is
opinion.
true.
But you mentioned you were born in Pakistan and you studied in the States and you're currently living in the States. So I want to ask you because I mean always I want to discover more like of how people manage to do certain things in order that if somebody is listening knows if it's possible to be done for them too. Or I mean everything, there are many all the roads lead to Rome, we say, which means there are many ways to do something. And
Right.
studying in the States and moving to the States is difficult with visa, and also the education in the States is quite expensive. So I'm curious how was to get a visa as a Pakistani to go to study in the States, and also how did you manage to finance the studies? Was it your family support, or did you need to get some loans? I know in America it's super popular to get a student loan and stuff like that.
Right. So, uh, getting a visa. So I'm a dual national. So I, I think that sort of helped. Because then I would apply on the British passport, which I think is, I think it just helped. But I was applying from Pakistan. So the
So
process to
you
get,
have a British passport too. I didn't understand that.
yes, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
um, I think that sort of made it a little bit easier. Um, but I don't think that it's very difficult to get a student visa. once you get into a good school and you have sort of a good academic record. So um, I think the only time that you might be rejected or denied is um, if they sense that you're not very serious about your education and you just want to, you know, go to America and party, or maybe just try and like live there. I think that sometimes if they're suspicious of that, then that can, I think that's the only reason that I would imagine someone would be denied a visa for. So the visa part for studying wasn't difficult. Financing the education, it was both my family who supported me, and then I also got scholarships at Pratt. So they have like an international merit scholarship. Um, so that sort of saved me, or saved my dad like 40%. Um, so that helped. And then I think I started interning in my third year of school. So after, you know, um, after, like after my third uh, year, I started saving up, and I would work on campus and I would intern. So I would try to kind of not ask him for money for all these material supplies and, you know, printing expenses, because it used to get a, you know, amount to a lot, and I didn't want to burden him. So yeah, kind of a combination of all three of these.
And for this scholarship you got, were you like a really perfect student before that, or you had just really high grades and you applied and you, I mean, I'm just curious because it's like
I
important. I was a very good
right.
student, but I wasn't like perfect. You wouldn't have only straight A's from me. You would have like a lot of A's and I don't know, A minuses or B pluses, or I don't know what is exactly the, like every country has a slightly different system, but I was like good but not perfect. And I'm curious, like, how was, like, if somebody's listening who was thinking, I want to apply for that, like, yeah.
Scholarship, yeah. Yeah, I was a bit of a nerd. So I did have all A's on my transcript, but I think Pratt, um, well, at least from what I understood, it was more the portfolio they cared about. So like my SAT score, which is a like a, I don't know if you know, but like the standardized like test that you have to take to apply to any U.S. school. I was not good at that, and my score was kind of average. And I took it twice, and I kind of got the same score, so I kind of gave up because it was, I didn't get the point of it, and I was like, okay, whatever. I'm just gonna hope and pray that you know, my portfolio will get me in. So um, I did just that. So yeah.
How was for you moving from Pakistan to New York? Like, not about, like, we all talk about architecture and design and all this stuff, but I mean, in the end of the day, one person is not only made of, I don't know, professional work, but it's also made of pure life. So for me, for example,
Right.
personally, when I moved to from Rome to Frankfurt, the first day I arrived, I said, "Oh, this place is so nice. I don't think I'm gonna go away from here." How was your reaction when you arrived in New York and you were starting living there?
So I definitely, so because I was very young, I was like 18 when I moved. So, and it was the first time that I was away from family. So I was very homesick for sure. Uh, and I remember like I missed my mom's food so much, and you know, I didn't know how to cook, and I was kind of miserable eating from the cafeteria because also like architecture school, like your kind of your sleep is compromised, so you're, you know, you're kind of struggling with that sleep deprivation, and then the food isn't that great, so it's like you're not really feeling very sort of happy, just eating out, or also I was very very introverted, so I was quite shy, and so I really kind of, I think, initially struggled to talk to people and like make new friends. And even though I knew, like, I always knew that that was going to be difficult, so I was prepared for it. um, and I wanted to kind of push myself to, like, come out of my shell. And I knew that if I go to a place where I don't know anybody, that it will eventually, help, and help me be a little bit more bold or confident. So it wasn't great initially, and but I think the city was really nice. Like, I liked that I don't need a car to get around, and I could, once I got the hang of the subway system, I kind of would try to um, go out like on the weekend, and explore. And so that part was great. And um, obviously, like, the architecture is you know or like the city is like, just has so many different styles, and like every neighborhood is a different vibe. And so it was nice to kind of, like, go to a different neighborhood every time, um, and then meet new people. And I think it was also comforting to know that I wasn't the only sort of person like who's on their own over there. So there were a lot of international people in my program. Um, and so I think once I knew that, okay, all of us are kind of in the same boat, um, I would try to kind of mingle with them. And so I got better, eventually. But initially it was difficult. I will not lie about that.
I one thing that I'm curious is that, for example, there are cities like London, New York, big cities that are very like romantic to, like, the idea of living in those cities is very romantic. But one thing that I like kind of learn online, and also by visiting London, for example, I haven't been to New York yet, but I'm gonna be there soon. um it's that they're very big, and it's so nice, the whole like urban environment, but like in a sense that it's so cool, the skyline and everything you can see. But it's very congested, like there are a lot of people,
Right.
overpopulation, like skyrocketing rents. Is that also like a factor for the quality of life, like nowadays? Is it for you better, like, because I know you have to really get
Yeah.
used to live in a tiny space in New York to be able
Right.
to manage to be at least in the city.
Yeah, I mean, there's a hefty price to pay for that. So it I often think about this because I'm like, why am I putting myself through, through this when I can just move to another city that is going to have more space, and it's probably going to be cheaper even. But I did actually move to, right after graduation. I moved to San Francisco, which is not that much cheaper, but I think uh, I tried to move to a different city, and I didn't quite sort of like it after a while. Initially, it was great. So I think what I like about New York is that now I know the city so well, that I'm kind of identify with, you know being a
Yeah.
New Yorker. And so I think it's just like holding on to that. And I think I'm okay living in a small space. And like, I think I can get creative. Just with organizing a certain way and making your space look nice, even if it's small. Um, it works. You make it work. So, and the good thing about both, I think even London, is that it's walkable, right? So you can like get to any place like in say about 30 to 40 minutes, and you don't have to spend time in traffic, and you can just take the subway. So accessibility wise, it's pretty, I kind of like it. And I like that my carbon footprint is much lower. So those
Yeah.
are kind of, I take comfort in knowing all of those things.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I mean, I asked this question just because like that's why it's called a creative insider, right? Because we want to know like
Yeah,
what is behind the scene, and not only what is like everybody can say how amazing. Like it's like Instagram, right? You put only the pictures you're happy on. You don't put like when you're grumpy or when you're stressed or stuff like that. So this is
right.
why I have also this kind of conversations. Um, One very important moment of the career of every architect and designer is the moment where you transition from going to school to start entering the professional world, especially for people like me and you that you mentioned yourself, you don't know anyone, you didn't know anyone in the field beforehand. That's why like you needed to figure it all alone. What was the case for you? What were your first internships, first jobs? How did you enter the professional world of architecture?
So I started my first internship after my third year um, in our undergrad, and that was at a very small studio uh, called Rafael de Cardenas, and it was it was only, I think, 2.5 months that I worked. But they did some really kind of interesting work. They had like I was part of this museum sort of exhibition um, at the Museum of Art and Design, and so I was mostly involved in that, and we it was kind of very hands on. So I remember doing like drawings in CAD, but then I also went around like shopping for like materials. I remember going to Chinatown. There's like this acrylic store over there, and just to get samples. So it was kind of interesting to, you know, be involved like in every sort of part of that project. I also remember painting some of the parts of the installation. So we were kind of, um, sort of all hands on. So that was like my first sort of experience. And I think that the one thing that I really enjoyed was, like you said, like I got some money out of it. So I was like, okay, I don't want to stop doing this. I don't want to go back to school, and I don't want to stop sort of, I don't want to just, be involved in school. So I decided that I'm going to find a part-time internship during school. So I went to I applied to this interior design company called Rote Studio, and they were mostly specialized in hospitality and multi-residential spaces, interior spaces, and that was kind of interesting because I realized that I didn't really know much about like during school. Like you don't really learn too much about the interiors. You're mostly focusing on the form of the building and the site constraints. And um, I was like, okay, well, how can I graduate from school and not know anything about how, like, what the interiors look like, or what, how does lighting play a role inside? And I think that was not given much of a priority in school. So I was like, okay, this is a great opportunity to kind of, learn a little bit. So so that was my next sort of um, internship, and I stayed there for till the end of my bachelor's. So um, until I graduated, I was working there part time, and I really enjoyed it because one, it was giving me I had some extra cash on me, but I also used it to like escape from school. It was like my mini sort of vacation from like um, away from the campus, and this was in Manhattan, so and my school was in Brooklyn, so I would just love coming into the city, and I would just spend the entire day there, and um, I didn't have to worry about my studio course or any other class. So I would give myself that one day to do that. So it was nice. So those are like my first sort of experiences, like in the real world or real practice of architecture. And then after I graduated, I moved to San Francisco to work for another interior design company called Mamo, uh, and they they also were similar to Rote Studio in that they specialized in hospitality and multi-residential, but they're a bit, I think, a little bit of a, I think they were like 50 people, so a little bigger in size. Um, and at the time, I was like, okay, maybe I should explore a different city and, see um, what it is like to live away from New York, and if I would like that better. So I did that, and there I think that was like my sort of first intro to Revit and the world of BIM, and they were actually very well set up in like the CAD workflow, but they were starting to transition um, to BIM, and um, wanted to kind of wanted people who would know that skill, and help with that transition. So I didn't know anything about Revit. I had taken one class, and I completely sucked at it because I had no time to focus on that class. So I was like, okay, I know how to open a Revit file, and I know how to, I mean, familiar with the interface, but not much more than that. But I'm happy to learn, and so that's how I got into that. And then I did a project, and um, after maybe 3 years there, I then transitioned to a BIM specific like role, um, and I came back to New York, and I started at Big, and now I'm here 3 years later, still at Big, and still in New York.
And when you were going to work for Big, what was like the first of all, was the drive that you wanted to go back to New York? I mean, how long did you stay in San Francisco?
3 years.
3 years. So after 3 years, you wanted to go
Yeah.
back to New York. And what was the work position you were applying for? Was it directly again like BIM responsible
Yes.
person, BIM expert?
Yes. So it I did want to come back to New York because I just missed it, and um, I was like, okay, even if I do move, I don't want to move for just anything. So I want to kind of wait and look around and see what I want to do next. Um, and I was so then later on, I think like not later, but I think maybe 4 or 5 months into sort of this job hunt, I realized that I think I would be better off in a more BIM specific role. Um, so then I only started applying to sort of BIM specialists and BIM designer roles. So, but then it was when I did make the move for after I got sort of the offer from Big. So it's not like I moved and then I joined them.
Hmm. And you mentioned when you moved to San Francisco, you were just straight out of school, and then this you didn't have already the skills to be a BIM expert. You barely knew about Revit. I mean, you knew the icon and how to
Right.
open a file, as far as I understood. What was
Yeah.
the like a lot of people, maybe, I don't know, have the misconception that okay, you study, you get your degree, you go to work, and then it's over, you just work. But you have to constantly learn, because especially in
Right.
our field, things evolve, technology evolves. So I was what was okay 5 years ago, it's now old. Maybe it's not the fastest moving industry, like, I don't know, the tech industry, but it's still like
Right.
technical solutions, softwares, and I think now big stuff are coming on the regulations side and stuff like that. Um, so, what was like your extra learning in the process from a graduate that doesn't know anything about Revit to become a BIM expert, and I don't know, BIM manager, if it's the right term for what you're doing,
BIM specialist.
BIM specialist.
Yeah. So I think so. What happened? So when they kind of they basically asked me. They were like, "Are you interested in learning this? Like, we don't want to force this on you. If you're more comfortable in like CAD, and then we're happy to kind of accommodate that as well." Um, and but I was sort of not. I wasn't a big fan of CAD either. I knew that that was like kind of, getting like sort of people were moving away from it, and so I was like, okay, this is an opportunity to learn something new. And they had also hired a new BIM manager around the same time. So they didn't have very many like sort of templates or standards, set up. So the BIM manager had come in to kind of help with that transition and basically take their CAD standards and convert it to more Revit standards and set up a template and all of those things. But they also had projects that were starting up in Revit, and um, because we were the interior designer or the interior architect, we didn't really get a say in like what the tools are going to be that we're going to work in. It was mostly coming from the design architect or the architect of record, and they were working in Revit, so they requested or they required us to also work in that. So that's how it kind of started, and they put me on this project, and they were like, you can always ask questions, and it's okay if you don't know everything. Obviously they're not gonna kind of expect like a fresh graduate to do everything. But that was actually a great sort of learning, experience, because I I like every time I would do something, quick, or like I would do it um, just to get it out and get the drawings out, and take a shortcut for it. I would realize that okay, later on this is going to be problematic, and so that's when I think I basically just started to understand why Revit does things a certain way, and why things are set up a certain way. And that I just found that very intriguing, and it was something I was like, okay, there is a certain workflow that you're supposed to work in, and every time I would talk to the manager, like she would agree, and she would kind of always also kind of be happy to know that there's somebody in the office who also kind of understands Revit, and um, is more interested in learning more, because most of the office was still like kind of more CAD savvy. So we kind of became friends, and then later I remember asking like my supervisor to only put me on like BIM projects, because I didn't want to go back to CAD, and I thought that if I do that, then I'm going to forget everything that I've learned in Revit. So then they agreed, and they said, that's great. Why don't you kind of help the BIM managers, with with these sort of in-house standard development, and anytime you have some downtime, you can just ask her for tasks, and I'm sure she could use your help. So I got involved in that, and that's when I started making all these parametric families, and um, kind of grew from there. And I realized, okay, this is a great skill to, you know, um, keep exploring and like keep developing. And so when I decided that I wanted to move, I also wanted to move out of, not out of interiors, but I wanted to move towards more architecture. So I think I kind of started to get a little bored, and I wanted to be challenged. I was like, oh, it would be nice to kind of um, go into a firm that does more challenging forms, and that would be a great learning opportunity, and that will also give me the opportunity to like test my Revit skills and develop those. Um, so so I think it was just wanting to learn more, and um, also enjoying that process that kind of made me decide that, okay, I want to make this transition to BIM.
And what was like for you the most like so you started of course helping the BIM manager, and then did the company for example invest in you in participating in specific I don't know programs for learning Revit more specifically? Maybe I don't know, there are a lot of workshops, courses, also from
Right.
Autodesk. um, and also how did you like, how was your role back then? Were you like directly becoming, so to say, a BIM expert slash technician, or were you still involved somehow in the design process of a building? Because I mean, sometimes BIM
Right.
experts, they're not more so much involved into the decisional process of how the building's gonna look like. Just they gather the information from the competition or feasibility team, and they turn that building into like a BIM model.
Right. Um, no, so I was a designer there. And I was involved in like design studies and space planning. Um, but I, they didn't, I didn't ask to attend any sort of workshops, or like um, kind of sign up for a course or anything. It was mostly just watching videos online, and on YouTube, and or Googling a lot of these queries, um, and obviously the BIM manager, she knew a lot more, so I would go up to her and ask all these questions as well, and she had um, some manuals, and even Revit Pure was kind of a big resource, that I remember using. So that way, I didn't think that did have enough resources to learn. Um, but no, I didn't go to I didn't get any like formal training. Um, and my role was always of a designer, so I was involved in the design, and like I was on deadlines, and um, for like concept as well as documentation, but I was less involved in the the sort of the fixture and finishes, or like deciding on those, or the selection of those kind, because in interiors, like that's also um, a big like scope. So you're involved in like choosing materials and designing furniture. So I wasn't very interested in that. So um, I asked to be more sort of to put on more like space planning and um, interior architecture rather than interior design. So they respected that and they let me do that and um, so yeah, I wasn't really a BIM expert. I don't think I'm still a BIM expert, but yeah, they didn't. I don't think they even needed like an additional like BIM specialist because it was a very small firm, so they wanted to keep me as a designer. Um, but I think I wanted to move into BIM, and I thought that um, and I also wanted to move to New York. So I kind of was like, okay, I don't want to ask them for too much because if they agree, then I have to stay. And I didn't want to stay. So it was, I think, I purposely like, just try to learn as much as I could and then make the switch.
Mm. And one thing that is very interesting to me is like, how do you apply as a with what portfolio do you apply for a job at the big as a BIM expert? Because um, like the first time you apply from school to an office, it's kind of like obvious. You just have to do a nice portfolio with all your
Mhm.
student work and show it, and then the firm get an idea and they hire you. And then when you're starting switching jobs, the portfolio, it's not so important in my opinion. Like, I mean, it is important, but it's very hard like that you say I did this, because no project you did alone. Like the real life projects are like every single piece of documentation that you putting out there is the fruit of many people. Like even if you take a section of a building and say what did you do in the section, uh, you did some stuff but not everything. So what
Right.
uh, if you
But
can.
I think that's like a common understanding, right? Like every time you send a professional portfolio, like you're not claiming that you did everything, but you were part of that process and part of, say, if you show like a section, that section is part of like a bigger construction set. So I would think that if somebody is showing that to me, that it is understood that you're part of that team and you've helped deliver those documents. Um, but have you worked on that from start to finish? No,
No,
I don't
but
know. You think that it's sort of you don't think you think otherwise?
no, no, no. But my question is like more like, how do you apply? How did you apply for a job by where probably there were many candidates, and how do you differentiate yourself? Because when you apply after school, what you apply with is your own work, more or less. Maybe there is one, two group
I
projects,
see. Okay.
but like when you apply with, I don't know, like you mentioned also that you've been working for a small office before that. It's not gonna it's, I mean, it's like now you've worked for big. So if you apply to, I don't know, Norman Foster, okay, she's worked at big, so it's basically similar office, like
Okay.
similar
Yeah.
structure. If you apply to
How
Zaha
do I
Hadid,
stand out,
yeah,
basically?
how, what was
Yeah.
for you, what did you think it's gonna make you stand out, and how was the interview? Was it like more technical, like did they ask you stuff about Revit so that they see you actually know stuff? Yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah. So I didn't include any of the design stuff in my portfolio. So I did make um, portfolio that only had professional work samples, and it was a mixture of like project work. So any sort of um, construction documentation and like snippets of like the Revit model and any sort of design options or studies that I had done inside of Revit. I kind of showed that. I remember I also put in some studies or like not like process like renders from Enscape. I don't know if you've heard about Enscape.
Yeah.
It's like so it was very new at the time, and um, my BIM manager had like sort of um, just come across it, and she was like, "Oh, this is a really great tool, and I want to test it out." And so I was like, "Okay, let me also try it." And so I played around with it for quite some time. I remember. So all I put in that like I that I'm open just to show that I'm open to kind of exploring new tools, and I think that got received pretty well. And then I had like while I was testing Enscape, I also put together like a short sort of user manual for the office that anybody who wants to get started in Enscape. This is what you need to do, and like this is helpful versus um, like it just to kind of have like a workflow in place. So I put that in, and I also put in like some of the um, families that I had developed for like the content library. So those were actually my own work. Like I started from scratch, and that was like very small sort of little project. So I put that in. So I kind of um, I think what I did is I read the job description. I looked at what they needed and what they wanted me to work on, or what they were looking for. And so I remember that they were looking for somebody who has a good understanding of Revit families and parameters inside of Revit, and um, also some facade related tasks. So um, because I was doing interiors, I had no facade experience. Like I didn't know how to do curtain walls, but I skipped that. But whatever I knew that I could present just to cater to that job description, I just put that in. So they were not looking for design, so I didn't put in any design um, related sort of images. So I think every time I looked at the job description, I kind of went like bullet by bullet, and a bullet point, and uh, kind of tweaked the portfolio to cater to that role and position.
What was your approach? Because I mean, I guess when you were switching jobs, trying to move back to New York, you didn't rely only on the application at Big, probably applied at multiple places. What was your approach like? Do you do multiple portfolios for every single office, or do you have like a master portfolio that you can quickly adapt? Because I mean, when you have a full-time job and you have to do like a portfolio and you have to apply, it's kind of a like probably it's not so much like for me, I'm a very calm person, so I don't care like about the interview. I don't get nervous, or
Yeah,
at least I learn how to not get used to how to like not to get nervous for an interview. But still, like doing a portfolio after work, and if you have to do multiple version, can become kind of hectic. So what is your like what was your approach for applying it? And also you have to consider that you don't know, maybe there is a job application tomorrow and you don't have like a week or 3 weeks to prepare a portfolio for that job application. So what was your approach in that situation?
yeah. So I think the approach was more. So I didn't have a master, but I had multiple versions. Because I'm also this person who gets bored of the same thing. So every time I would look at the same portfolio, I'm like, oh no, I can change this and I can make this a little bit better. And um, the perfectionist in me would kick in. But it would be relatively the same sort of format. I would just, you know, depending on the job requirements, I would maybe add or subtract a project. Um, and I always had a shorter version that I would send out with the application, and then have the full sort of extended version of the portfolio um, in for the interview. So that would be like a printed version, and um, then that would have more projects. But um, for big, I remember I didn't really um, spend too much time because I'd already kind of sent in a few applications already, and I think the problem that I was facing was not being there in person. So I feel like the fact that I was in San Francisco applying to a job in New York, like I would get ignored, or my application would get ignored, like almost like immediately. So I uh, remember going, like I went to New York to attend. Like I remember there was like a career fair at Pratt, and so I decided to just go and like show my face because there are going to be like a lot of different companies, and um, so I was like, okay, once I like have a face to face sort of connection with like the recruiters over there or the people over there, that might be a, you know, better, I'd have a better shot. Um, but I also did a lot of networking on through LinkedIn, like that I always recommend. Like, if you know somebody, if you can find somebody like on the team that you want to work in, then maybe try and reach out to them and see like if they're open to a conversation. And I I mean, I remember I did that for my current role. I reached out to my now manager. He's the BIM director, Jan. Um, and I remember reaching out to him, and he was kind enough to, get on a call with me, and that was like the same week that I was um, leaving for New York. So I told him that I'm coming to New York, and he said, "Okay, come on in, and we'll chat." And so it kind of uh, just happened like all in a week's time. Um, but yeah, I don't think that I did spend initially. I think I spent a lot of time to make the portfolio, but that was before I applied anywhere. So I spent some time. I know it's difficult to do that um, outside of work, but I anytime you want to switch, I think there is some time you need to put in.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. But it's a good strategy, like we have discussed already on this show. Like some people, like we had also some recruiters, and this is a common approach, and it's quite smart to chat with the person that you're gonna work with. So that's, I think, I mean, obviously you got the job, so it worked. And how was like, okay, and in like, was it like a very, like, did you know a lot about big before you started there? And once you started there, how was it? How it is now? How you have developed your skills since then? I know like you guys do a lot of stuff in the design process with Grasshopper, Rhino, and then there is like the Rhino inside in Revit. So, and um, are you still like designing a lot, or are you more like BIM operative?
Yeah,
Yeah, feel free to tell us
right.
all the secrets of the sauce.
Yeah. So no, we don't design, but we execute. So we were involved in the execution. That doesn't mean that we don't look at, multiple iterations of the design. So we are in on like how the design is going to develop, and but we don't do the studies. So, but so initially, I didn't. It was very overwhelming because I was coming from like a 50-person firm to like 100, and I think there were maybe 200 or 180 people when I joined. So that's change in scale was a bit overwhelming. But the team was small, so the BIM team is was only 3 people. Ollie was part of the team at the time, um, and so I think that sort of still helped where I was like, okay, I still only mostly interact with like Jan and Ollie, um, and and then it's like the project teams that you are assigned. So um, I to start off like um, I was only given one project team, and they were starting off a new project, and um, it was pretty like the geometry was pretty complex. I was kind of scared, but I think after some, I remember there was a lot of trigonometry involved in trying to bring those elements into Revit and make those families. And I remember like Googling like the formulas because I completely like forgotten all my high school math. But it was fun, and I eventually kind of got it to work. And there were these like I don't know if you know like adaptive components inside of Revit, um, but they I had I remember feeling nervous, but I was always encouraged. So I tried to not then hesitate to ask questions, because I think a lot of people um, don't do that, and they think that, oh, this is such a dumb question. And like now I feel like, now we like when I do trainings at work, like or they're new like Revit, users who are just starting to learn, like that's the first thing I tell them, like please ask questions, because we know that you're not going to be able to know everything on the first day. And so the more questions you ask, the faster you learn. So I think I kind of did the same thing, and I was also relying on like Google and like YouTube videos and all that to help me. So um, in the end, like I think, and then the project is still on, like it's under construction. I can't give you the name yet, but it's been quite a quite an accomplishment. I think so. Um, but what was your other question? I forget.
Yeah, how did your skills develop at Big? Because also I know that at Big, I mean, generally when you work at a bigger company, there are a lot of opportunities to learn. Like you have internal courses. I mean, just by working with the other super talented people with you, you learn from each other. So, what were the things that? How did your skill set develop at Big?
Develop, yeah. I think so because the projects are so sort of like the geometries are kind of it's never a box, or it's never like a simple form. That every time you start on a new project, like you know you kind of have to brainstorm a little bit, and like how are you gonna build this or model this geometry. And so that's, I think, always like the best sort of way to learn, where I'm given a project, and I have to come up with a way to bring it into Revit and to start up this like model. So um, I whether it's like using like curtain panels, or developing like a family for that, or it's like adaptive components or Rhino inside, um, and scripting it, which I'm not the best at, and I'm still like pretty, I'm still learning those skills. So um, But I think whenever there's a problem or like something that you can't fix or you can't figure out, you have the like my team is like pretty has a diverse skill set, so it's like it's not like whatever I know the other person like my coworkers also know the exact same thing, like they know different programs and different software, so I can always rely on them to help me out. So we kind of you know work together um, to get whatever is needed to be done. um, and courses wise, like I try to kind of um, experiment or like learn about new software. So for example, like I think the like plugin development was like something that we only recently started doing at Big. So like using PyRevit, and you can actually set up like a whole custom like um, a custom like toolbar inside of Revit, and the deployment like PyRevit has made it very very simple to deploy those plugins. So that I started doing that about a year ago. So I'm still learning. Like I've been looking up like Python courses or Python videos, and so that's one thing that like I've been trying to add to my skill set. Um, and I think the other sort of skills like coordination and Navisworks and all those kinds of skills, like I think it's more like when the project requires it, you kind of jump in and like try to understand it and learn it as you go. So it's more like you already have something to apply this skill on. So like when you have a project, it's much more faster to learn a skill. Um, and so yeah, I've come a long way, I think, because also came from like interiors, and to deal with facades, like I had no experience in that. So just that a difference in like scope um, and scale, like those things, really helped me become more sort of well versed in Revit as well, and other uh, tools. But I think training also was like something that I didn't used to do before. So we, whenever there's a sort of new project team, we have to kind of gauge like, okay, how many people are like beginners, like do they need like a basic like fundamentals training. So we do like a day and a half long sort of a workshop almost. And I was very I'm not very good at like public speaking, or it doesn't come very naturally to me. So I've always taught like one-on-one, and this was like the first time that I had to teach like a whole room, full of new like Revit users. So that once you start teaching something, I think you automatically um, are getting better at the content yourself, because you're going to be bombarded with all these questions of like, but what if this, like they'll give you these scenarios of like, well, what would I do if it was XYZ, like, and then you try to think of these scenarios in your head, and you're like, okay, yeah, this is the workflow you're going to choose when you have um, a certain sort of set of constraints. And so I think training was definitely a good way to learn. Like I always encourage people to mentor or like teach um, somebody else, like uh, because it's a great way to learn and grow.
No, definitely. I mean, I mentioned a lot on the podcast, like the learning pyramid. That like learning pyramid, like you would think, studying something is what you're gonna make you learn the most, but then it's not. It's actually the first step. Then the second step is apply what you have learned in practice, and the highest end is like when you start teaching someone else, because then you're gonna really master also how to react on doubts from other people, like as you said, because maybe sometimes the students ask you a question that you don't know yourself, and then you have to think it through, and then you have to research it, and then you're going to learn something new. And at what, like I can imagine that also you have developed some construction skills, like construction detailing skills, because beam modeling is not purely geometry, it's also like
Right.
it's like a digital twin of the actual building. And I'm curious, how deep do you guys go into the BIM method or BIM model, like because you work on a very international projects, so I can imagine that you have to always collaborate with like some local office, because
Right.
architecture is very
Yeah.
regulated. I know for
Yeah.
experience, because I live in a city where we have the pleasure to have a building designed by Big. In Frankfurt, we have the Omni Tower, and I had friends that work in
Yeah.
local offices, and they had the honor to work on the
To
construction
work with it.
planning.
Oh,
Uh, so yeah, I'm curious, like if you need to know, like you mentioned facades, like facades, there are many different kind of facades, and there are many different kind of
mhm.
details. And then when the design looks for a certain geometry, I don't know, when you have the box stacked somehow, or like shifting somehow, you have to achieve those line, you have to foresee like the thermal insulation and which layer is gonna come where, so that you actually adapt the geometry to the construction and so on. So yeah, like how deep do you go into this stuff?
So I think that because the design is not, it's like constantly being developed, right? So it's not like the design has been finalized and now we have to build a BIM model. Is you're kind of detailing as you go. So some of the basic sort of form or geometry is, kind of has already been like baked, but it's still, developing. So I think it varies a little bit from project to project. Like sometimes we just model like and we don't model too much detail. So we'll model the basic elements, but when it starts to get super like detailed, then you want to switch to like 2D. So like even within Revit, like you have like families that are called data items, that are basically like representations of these very small like nuts and bolts that will go in the building and that you can use on your more sort of um, detailed drawings. So and then what for like atypical sort of conditions, you basically just you'll understand like the um, impact that it's going to have like in the when you coordinate with all the other consultants. So um, but I think during you always come back to like the 2D. So like once you've highlighted the atypical conditions, you're just going to add that to your set. Um, but sorry, I'm forgetting your question again. Could you
No,
repeat that
like
again?
how like um yeah, like because Revit is infinite. Basically, you can end up putting in uh, further information, and it's on and on and on and on and on. Like let's say, starting from the simple thing, you can make a door, you can say the material, then you can say the model of the exact product, you can say the handle, you can say the handle model, you can go on, like the parameters that you can insert
Right.
can be like, it's like, I don't know, it's like those Russian matrioskas, like those sort of
The
yeah,
Russian
the
doll.
doll that goes in and in and
Yeah.
in until you don't get to this really really tiny doll. So the question I
Right.
had is like, how deep you go. Like, I mean, there
Deep.
is,
Okay.
like, you can go to the level that all the model and all the like measurements can be extracted out of the Revit model for the bidding and tendering and things like that. Or you can go really to, I don't know, the future. Ideally, people will not use you won't use drawing plans on the construction side. They will have like a tablet with the model of the building and just click and interact with it, I guess. Yeah.
Right.
So my question is like, what is the purpose of work at the big for the BIM? Because the BIM is like building information model. So until which
Right.
information you go down.
Nation view. Okay, that makes more sense. So I think the first thing that really kind of decides like how far we're going to go is the scope of the project and how much time we have, right? So obviously, like the client, we don't have like all the time in the world to like kind of define every detail and like model every detail of the building. Um, so so if and then there are projects that like we are just the design architect on, so that's also like the scope. So sometimes we don't see a project through construction. We'll only stop until the design has been finalized, and then we hand it over to like the local architect or the architect of record. So in that case, then we don't really spend too much time detailing um, every portion of the building because it's not a contractual requirement. So it kind of all comes from like what we have signed up for and what we are responsible for. Um, but I think overall, like when, say, if we are the architect of record and we are responsible for constructing and administering that construction, we typically advise to kind of model like to like a quarter inch scale, um, and so that the overall sort of forms are um, or the overall framework is like in place or like is 3D. And then you want to switch over to 2D because um, you you can't put in all the information in 3D. There's just not enough time. And in terms of like like the information is always also coming from like we don't put that much like that many materials um, in Revit. So we'll because the like the specifications are basically a separate document, and we'll just basically annotate our drawings, but we're not gonna sit and like assign like materials to every model element because we're not using it to get material like count or estimates. So it all depends on like what we need. So um,
And
say
those
yeah,
2D details, do they go out in AutoCAD, or do you have like 2D plans
no, inside
within?
Revit.
Okay.
No, within Revit you can.
Yeah, I know.
So yeah, Revit gives you like it's called a drafting view. Like you can go and it's kind of sort of like a blank canvas, and you can draw in those atypical conditions. So You no, we never going to we never go back to CAD. I'm super against that. We have some people who are more familiar with CAD, and they will draw their detail in CAD, and then they're going to be like, okay, can you bring this into Revit? And it's always such a it's
But
a
isn't
big
CAD like
task.
what guys use more like in the earlier stages when they do competition or feasibility? Just because Revit, it's not so flexible for those purposes. It's like just Revit. It's
You can
very
also
very
do
good.
Rhino.
Yeah, Rhino, but then you have to kind of do like 2D editing for some stuff.
2D,
Um,
right, right.
yeah, but it's like I've used Revit for a year, and I use
Okay.
ArchiCAD. It's my main BIM. Here in Germany, ArchiCAD is very popular.
Is more
Um,
popular. Okay.
no, I
What
don't
is
know.
your opinion
My opinion
of
is
like
that
the comparison?
um, there is no perfect tool. Like ArchiCAD is good for some stuff, um,
Yeah.
but worse for others. And Revit is better for some stuff, but worse than other for others. And I think that Revit is much better if you're working in a company where there is a closed BIM, which means I don't know, all the technicians, engineers, and everybody that are involved in the project work in Revit. And that was the
Yeah.
case for me because I work in a company that was specifically implementing integrated planning, which means we were architects, but together with all the other players in the office. And I think ArchiCAD is more like architecture friendly. Like
I
you can
see.
do like quickly also good looking stuff. You can quickly do some 2D stuff that look nicer, but in the same time you can build everything in BIM. And but they are like, for example, building a parametric family or stuff like that. It's very a little harder in ArchiCAD, and it's more easy on
Okay.
Revit. But in the same time, every single input that you have to do in Revit, it's like 25 clicks. So,
That's true.
so like,
I think the initial time to set it all up is definitely is more, and but it pays off, is what I
yes,
tell people
yes,
at least. You know, I like, and people who really understand it, like they'll agree with me. So um, it's
I've,
it's it's only when you take shortcuts that you're sort of kind of not like, I don't know, creating more work for yourself almost later. So
yeah,
that's
no,
when people are give up on Revit.
I'll put it that way. Like Revit, you can. A lot of people compare it sort of to programming. You can do a lot more that's personalized and can
Yeah.
be integrated within. It can work more interactively with the BIM functions. And in ArchiCAD, you have way more like presets, and it's great
Okay.
for doing like I think it's very good for creating quick drawings to create, but it's more like an architect. Like you have to use way more like the presets, and then if it's something you can build anything, but still you have to. It has also the function like Rhino inside and stuff. It's just a little less
Okay.
personalizable, or you have to go like you have to dive in more if you need to personalize. It's a little bit different workflow, let's say, but it's as I
Okay.
said, I couldn't like mm, I cannot say one is better, the other is worse.
One
They're
over the
a little
other.
bit
Okay.
different. Um,
You don't want to
and
choose.
I'm not like
Okay. I mean, that's fine.
yes, yes. I think
It's good to know both. I think it's good to know both, so that you can sort of choose which one works better for what uh, application.
yes, I think I'm a like a generalist architect. I know a little bit of everything, and I can dive in
Yeah,
into every aspect of something. But I'm not like a super expert of Revit, neither of ArchiCAD. I mean, more ArchiCAD because I have longer experience, and Revit just a year and a half. But at the end of this year and a half, I understood the importance, as you said, of the steps and not taking the shortcuts.
right,
Um,
right.
but yeah, and I'm curious, like how are there other girls that do like uh BIM? Are there other girls in the BIM team? Because I don't know. uh for example, in my office, it's actually 50-50. We have one male BIM expert and one female, so I know other
Okay,
girls
yeah.
that are like but I mean, we're like a people, like we are, I mean, no, they're more than, yeah, they're more than two, but two are, let's say, the big BIM players. uh and we have different locations, so I don't know how it is in the other locations. We have office of 100 people. How it is in big, and are there other, do you know a lot of girls that want to go in that direction?
Um, no, I'm the only girl or woman on the BIM team here. We did used to have one other woman in Copenhagen, which I think that was about 2 years ago. So since then, I've been the only girl on the team. Um, I actually was wondering the same question, like how many women are, like what's the ratio, in this uh, world of like specialists, like are there more, is it a 50-50? But I think I think it's getting better. So I recently discovered that there's this group called Women in BIM, and they are basically this community, like all of like women, like BIM specialists, or like who are just like BIM experts, and you can sign up if you want like a mentor, or you want to mentor somebody else. So I only recently discovered that, so now I feel like there is more, there are more women than I initially thought. um, but at Big, we have like BIM leads, who are like more sort of um, they're like the dedicated BIM, um, experts on the project side of the team. So they're always like they're full time on one project, and they sort of we work with them. So I know more like women who are have been BIM leads, but not a specialist yet. Um, but I don't. I think it's growing.
And how it is like for you, the working conditions as a BIM expert compared to the regular architect that designs, doing this expert work, is it a little bit less high intensive? Like, is it like more? I mean, I know that you have always time constraints, right? You have it everywhere, no matter
Right.
what kind of job you're doing. But sometimes, if you work on a competition team, can get really crazy, and you're basically working the same way as if you were in a school. Um, so I'm curious,
Yeah.
like if you're like a
No.
BIM expert, because you work on projects that are already more or less designed, is it a little bit less? Because there you have like a lot of the unknowns already solved, right? You get the shape of the
Right.
building. So is it a little bit less time consuming because you basically have to
Yeah.
just translate it?
I think the work life balance is definitely better. So uh, I think we definitely don't work as late as the those who are working on the competitions. Um, so and but the design team still like even if the projects are like already like the geometries are like set in stone, like they will work. I think it's sort of seasonal, like they will work long hours like around the deadline, um and even like the BIM specialists, like I will work with them. So um I'll sometimes stay late if there's a deadline, and they need. I always offer like um, sort of my extra pair of hands to help meet the deadline. So I that way I can also feel like I'm part of the design team, and I think it's an opportunity to also kind of learn more about like the the construction drawings. That's always something that I like to I'm interested in. So but it's seasonal, and I think it's great because um, I don't think I have the capacity to pull all nighters anymore. Um, so the work life, yeah, I think it's better work life balance for sure.
And I'm gonna ask again about the economical aspects. Do you think BIM Expert gives you better like opportunity to be rewarded a little bit higher as a what is it called, as a BIM
Mm,
expert, or is the
yeah,
range is pretty similar?
no, I think overall in general, like BIM and computational like specialists or design technology specialists are definitely paid a little bit more, just because they have that extra skill or like special they're specialized in one skill. And so right now the demand in general I think is like higher, and I think that was initially like when I was also thinking about this transition, like that was sort of the incentive as well, that I'll get a better pay jump. So um, I yeah, it's I think in general is uh, better and even a big,
Mhm.
but the
And I'm
trajectory is different, right? Like you don't really, the career path is kind of different from if you were to be a designer. Um, so yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm curious, like, what is your personal vision for the future in this field? Do you have like goals that you want to achieve in order to get like, I mean, what are the next steps for you in order to get higher in the hierarchy? Or is there something that, I don't know, what is your vision in general for this technology and method, and your personal vision?
I think it's yeah. I think it's gonna keep growing. Like it's, you know, I think it's only now that like people like firms are building like these design technology teams, and they are understanding that this is an important sort of important to have, and so I think that way it's going to keep growing. And like we also have all these like new softwares and products, like technologies just keeping continuing to evolve. So there's plenty of opportunity, and I think personally I would like to kind of head a design technology department at some point. But yeah, I think I'm on my way. Uh, but yeah, I think it's there's I think even clients now like kind of understand like that this the BIM model or is going to help them save money. It's going to help them like sort of after the building is built. So like for like facility and operations, like they can use this model, so they're also more willing to invest, which is great for us. because we don't have to spend so much time convincing them that this is a good approach to construction and documentation.
No, definitely, and saves a lot of time. And it's, I mean, recently I've been on a workshop about this new method, or not method, but regulation, more or less, which is the ECG, which stands for like social, environmental, and governmental. So
Okay.
that, I don't know, they will be taken much more care in the future, and will be regulated, that the buildings, the real estate has to follow environmental rules, social in a sense that
Mhm.
enhance social life, and also like in form of like that the products has to be certificated, that during the production of a certain building material, no people were I don't know, mistreated, or that I don't know, like for example, if you buy something that not third world countries has used children work and stuff like that, and all this
Right.
certification, all this information will be like regulated and expected for improved, like has to be proven in front of the authorities in case of controlling, and all this extra information that will need to be flowing into a, for example, construction project, will need to be managed somehow. And the only way to manage this big
Right.
amount of information is BIM. So I
Right.
think it's gonna be like an essential tool, and for me,
Ne-
more, it's
Yeah.
gonna be more paperless in the future.
Yeah. No, I agree. Now there's like iPads on site and robots on site, and so there's like the whole construction process is like changing so much. Um, so I think, yeah, it'll look very different um, in maybe like I don't know, like a decade from now. Um, like I feel like a site is going to look very different.
Yes,
Um, yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Well, Neha, we covered a lot of topics. I'd say always like this is so much. There is so much we can cover in one conversation, but that doesn't mean that this is going to be our last conversation. All the guests are always welcome back to come in the future and share their further stories, further development. We always like to conclude the podcast in a positive note and a part of a note for inspiration. And I would like to know if
Okay.
you could share with us some of your like favorite books, TV show, podcasts, movies, music, sport, or any other activity that you like doing when you want to get inspired and pumped up to create, or just pumped up in general.
Um, okay. I think the first thing that I always like to do, I think it's more just to kind of decompress, or like just, I basically like to go out on very, very long walks by myself. That's why like my Instagram handle also says like I'm a part-time like wanderer. I don't have a destination. I just like keep walking, and New York is great for that. So I think that's like usually what I turn to when I'm feeling overwhelmed, or I'm not like feeling demotivated. That's the first thing that I do. And even when I travel, I think I like to go to cities where I can walk around. And so usually it's that. And then I think the second um, and actually, well, while I'm doing that, then I guess I'm listening to like podcasts or music, and I usually have like one playlist of like South Asian like classical music. That's that's usually like my go-to. So there's like Aruj Aftab and Anushka Shankar. I don't know if you know about any of those artists,
If
but
you have a
um,
link, if you have a link for a Spotify playlist, we can share it so people can like actually go and click on it and enjoy a
yeah,
little bit of different music.
yeah, sure, I'll definitely share that. But yeah, and then I think the other thing is just taking breaks. I like to I'm not around family all the time, so for me, like that's very important. Like I want to go visit my sister. I want to go visit my parents, and I have some extended family members in the U.S. So I try to take time um, to do that. So those are the two ways I think. I'm not
No,
very big on books.
it sounds great. It sounds great. Well, Neha, thank you very much for your time, and it was a pleasure having you on the podcast. And you're always welcome back in the future.
No, thank you. It was great chatting. Yeah, I hope to keep in touch, and yeah, we can. I'd love to talk more.
And I'm coming to New York in September, so if you're there, we can meet in
Oh,
real life. So,
yes,
uh,
absolutely. You must come. I'll give you. You should come to Big New York and the office. I can show you around as well.
yes, definitely. I'll do like the big offices tour. I can go to London to see Ollie at some point, and then I'm coming to New York. I already got
And you were
some.
in Copenhagen, right?
Yes, I
Recently.
was in Copenhagen. I started from the origin, right? So I'm gonna go next New York, which
Yeah.
is the second office. It's gonna be hard to
And
get
then London.
to
Okay,
the
okay.
Chinese one. It's gonna be a hard one. Um,
That
okay.
one you can, I think, keep for last because it's still relatively
Yes,
new.
that will
Yeah,
be my last step of the big tour.
big tour. Well, you
Yes,
never know. We'll probably expand to other places, so it probably won't end there. But yeah, no, you have a long way to go. But no, I'm excited. You should definitely shoot me a message
I
when you're
will.
here.
I will. Well, thank you, Neha. Bye bye. Have a good one.
Thanks. Bye.